Welcome back, everybody. We're a little bit early. Everybody's back in their seats, and so in the interest of time, I thought we would go ahead and continue with the board committee reports. And with that, Mr. Elmore and Law and Rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Law and Rules Committee met yesterday, and as we all know, there's been a lot of discussion lately about changing the time period allowed to complete all required sections of the CPA exam. And in April, the NASPA board voted to extend this period under their rules to 30 months from the current rule of 18. And they also encouraged all state boards to amend their rules accordingly, or in whatever fashion they deemed that they wanted to do. So our committee met yesterday and discussed several options that we had available to change our rules. And as we all know, the rulemaking process is quite lengthy. It sometimes takes a lot of time going back and forth through the various state offices. So our committee decided to recommend that we allow our one of the provisions of NASBA's recommendation was to grant 12-month extensions at the discretion of each board to people who needed more time during this interim period before the rule actually takes effect, which is January 1 of 24. So our committee recommend that we give our executive director approval to grant extensions of 12 months, up to 12 months, for persons who needed that in her discretion, and also that we do this during this transition period until the new rule becomes effective on January 1st of 24, at which time we would recommend that we adopt option 1 of our executive director's schedule that she presented to us.
So that comes as a recommendation or a motion?
I think it's a recommendation.
And I don't know, I may have misheard, but we don't know necessarily that our rules will become effective in January 24th.
Yeah, NASBA's rule becomes effective January 1st, 24. That's why I said sometimes our process is a very lengthy process, and we're not sure what the total or the end result will be as far as our actual effective date compared to that. But during this transition period, we recommend giving Wendy approval authority on this 12-month extension process until that does become effective.
All right. If you would like to restate the motion, or bring it as a motion and restate it, that would be great. And then that way Karen can get it written down, because I think last time I didn't give her enough time to get it all typed in. So.
Okay, number 1, is it a recommendation or is it a motion? I didn't think we were going to vote on this.
Well, to give Wendy the 12-month extension authority, that needs to be a motion to give her that.
It doesn't the committee was bringing the motion, but can't he bring it individually? We didn't have is this one that we didn't have before?
Yeah.
Right, but
No, that was a different one. That was legal.
But since the committee didn't actually vote on it, I was going to ask, as the chair of the committee, would you make a motion? Since it's a recommendation.
A motion on both of those things, or just the first one?
Just the first one.
Okay. I will make a motion that we give our executive director authority to approve extensions of up to 12 months during this transition period before the new rule becomes effective. That's the motion. And then our recommendation is that in putting together these rules, that we adopt option 1
I have a motion, do I have a second? Discussion?
So one of the items that we discussed yesterday was that this approval authority would be in the context of basically current guidelines.
Yes.
And to me, that meant that there had to be, among other things, perhaps due to circumstances outside of the candidate's control.
Yes, that's a good point, Kevin.
This would not be a blanket automatic extension for anybody who asks.
Using the same criteria that we have been using. So I'll amend my motion.
All right, so, we have a motion, we have a second, discussion. So I think I have to bring this motion, do I bring this motion now to a vote and decline it, and then a new motion be made, or do I now, we have a motion to amend the motion?
I would recommend dealing with the amendment to include the clarification of using existing criteria. And we would vote on the amendment, and then if that passes, then we could proceed to the main motion.
I have not agreed to Kevin's comment, and yet deny first and then start over. But I think the fact that I agreed with it, I basically adopted the suggestion.
Okay. So do I have a second for the amendment? All right. Now, discussion about the amended motion. Any discussion? Any further discussion?
I do have one question myself. On this option 1 versus option 2, when it goes back to legal, to actually make these rules and get them all in place, is it possible that you would come back with an option 3 that we would eventually approve?
Don't imagine so, because this is, I mean, Wendy and I have talked about what's the best way to handle this, and, what would be, is there a proposed?
No. I was just curious as to whether it's okay for us to go ahead and say, we're gonna adopt option 1.
Well, and I think that's another thing maybe for the board's consideration, is that we're still under the 18-month rule. So, and we don't technically, now, is it highly likely, or is it, I think that it's likely that the new rule is going to be approved. But we don't technically know that for sure. And it's not approved yet. So, just, I guess, know that, if you're voting on to adopt proposal 1, you're voting essentially contingent upon, this is how we're gonna handle it if we do get a new rule that extends it from 18 to 30 months.
Are we voting on that option as well as Wendy's role, or?
Well, that's where I'm based on his motion. I don't think the option 1 was part of my motion.
Did you call that a
I
recommendation?
think that was a recommendation, but I'll be glad to make it as part of my motion.
Well, I thought that was just discussion yesterday.
I think the proposal should, at this point, just like you said, leave it as a recommendation and should not be a vote. It can certainly be part of the record that that's what the discussion was, and that the board leaned towards option 1. But I think the clear part is the authority you're giving me in this interim until we know when the rule will become effective.
And that's the way I presented my motion. The second part was a recommendation.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anything else? All right, licensing, Pam Church.
All right, we have several cases, and we did go over these yesterday, and the committee developed motions for each one. Wendy, can I present, other than the 10-year one, and have it vote blanket on all of them together, or do we need to do each one?
I think I'd like you to do each one. I think we had a denial in there.
We did.
I want to make sure that it's very clear on the record.
Very good. All right, the first one is Elizabeth Cameron, who is requesting an extension until January 1st, 2024 for several medical situations and an ongoing, condition. So, in keeping with our approach, the board does not try to assess medical conditions and the repercussions, but given documentation, we do take that under consideration. So the board moves that we grant this extension to January 1st, 2024.
All right, that comes from the committee. No seconds required. Any discussion?
And that is for reg, correct? For reg scores.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Chairman?
Going back to the computer just for All right, the second one is Jay Kirani. He's requesting audit and reg reports be reinstated due to loss of a family member and the ongoing depression that he says resulted. There was no additional documentation provided. We received this request April 25th, 2023, which was right before our last meeting. And Wendy contacted this candidate and said, "You've not provided documentation about the family member, such as relationship, et cetera, and about the medical conditions, very serious medical condition, of course, is depression. So we need the documentation." His auditing expires 12/27/21. Reg expires 3/29/22. So the board, it's another consideration is that he's asking for a retroactive extension of over 1.5 years, which is not in keeping with precedent we've set in other cases. So, the committee is moving that we deny this extension, given the lack of documentation and the long period of time, of the request, the effective date of the request. We did note that he can bring documentation and ask for this extension for consideration again. I'm not saying what the outcome would be at that time, but we would consider it with additional documentation. The motion is not to grant the extension.
All right, we have a motion from the committee. A second is not required. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will pause here just to say that it's still under my interpretation that David Crenshaw is one of our board members is listening. However, he is not elected to participate in voting, thus requiring a roll call.
Yes, sir, he has
Okay.
responded via chat.
All right. So at that point, I would say all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Chairman?
3, Catherine Montesi, her VEC expires 6/20/23. She's requesting a 10-day extension until 6/30/23 due to a last-minute test center closure on 6/20/23, where she was scheduled to take reg. She rescheduled reg and passed it on 6/26/23. She has provided documentation showing that the test center did have a closure, and her efforts to communicate with both Prometric and NASBA. If approved, she will have passing scores for all parts. So our motion, the committee's motion, is to approve the request because this was clearly beyond the control of the candidate.
All right. We have a motion, from the committee. A second is not required. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Madam Chairman?
Next was Joseph Rementer. And this one, we noted, is somewhat a unique case. The candidate is requesting a 12-month extension on auditing, which would give until December 6, 2023. We, in keeping with how we're treating things right now, we have said, we're interpreting that as 1/1/24 because of the extension and changes that kick in at that point. He has provided support, including documentation showing that he is currently in a 4-month, very part-time leave of absence from work, which began in May, to focus on the exam. This is a career pattern that he describes at length, talking about how he took a job before he really wanted to, because he was trying to pass the CPA exam and then got on the track to become manager, and now he's at the point where he can't become manager because he doesn't have a CPA certificate. But we noted in particular the extreme effort he's shown and the sacrifice, not just personally, but financially, to commit to this. So it seems that he has shown good faith effort and that he was very dedicated to the goal of becoming part of our profession. So the committee moves that we approve an extension to January 1st, 2024.
Madam Chairman, this is the one where I recuse myself.
And also, I don't know the individual, but I'm a current shareholder of LMC, so I should accuse myself also.
All right, so we have a motion from the committee. A second is not required, so discussion. Let it be noted that two have recused themselves from this voting process. Any further discussion?
You know, I think we have had instances where we have denied credit extensions solely on the basis of folks that were busy during busy season and couldn't study during that time and so forth. And I was torn about this one, and I realized, and I think the chairperson of the committee in the committee discussion yesterday, made a good faith effort to distinguish this situation from those, given the career decisions this candidate has made to basically put aside his work or her work on a leave of absence to concentrate on getting the exam done. But it was a close call in my mind.
I agree, because we do not try to assess personal situations that we don't consider extenuating. But this, the whole case together, we felt warranted special consideration.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And let the record note that we have two gentlemen that did not vote. All right, Madam Chairman.
Mr. Stewart has filed a request for extension, but it should be noted that he was able to pass the rest of the exam and has actually fulfilled that requirement within the time frame, so he does not need an extension. So that's why we are not considering Mr. Stewart's petition at this time. The next was Ali Zafar. Auditing expired 6/30/23. Candidate is requesting a 5-month extension on auditing until 11/23/23. And we are again pushing that to 1/1/24 to be in keeping with the extension. And the reason was 3 trips, extended trips to Pakistan, before passing in 2019. And he said, he points out that, his father passed away from a prolonged invasive form of cancer that really took its toll on his mother, financially, personally, and of course on him as well. And he needed to travel overseas to Pakistan on numerous occasions to support her, both during the illness and then after his father passed away. And he indicates he also had a newborn baby at this point in time. So he managed to study and pass on December 23rd. So the committee moves that we report that we grant this extension to 1/1/24 due to extenuating circumstances beyond the cancer.
Right, that comes to, as a motion to the board, a second is not required. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Madam Chairman.
All right, and finally, we have another category of petition from Daniel Melee. And this is different because he was applying to become licensed for the first time after in Tennessee. But he has now surpassed the 10-year limit after he passed all parts of the exam. So the facts are that he applied for licensure March 9th, 23. After he corrected some application deficiencies, it was noted that his exam scores expired on February 25th, 23. He also said that his employer filled out something wrong, so he just barely didn't get under the wire. He said it took longer than he anticipated to transfer his grades and his scores and his additional documentation from California, Pennsylvania, and New York. And by the time he did that, the window had expired. So on February, I don't know if I have the exact date, February 20. So we are moving, let me point out, that on these 10-year periods, our general practice has been to grant extensions. Sometimes with CPE required. This person is an enrolled agent, so we know that he's had to get 72 hours of CPE, which is close to our requirement. And he knows some of the accomplishments of his career, and he's obviously a very active part of the profession already. So we are moving that we extend that 10-year period to today's date, 7/25/23, because of the extenuating circumstances and the short period of time, and also the precedent we set.
All righty. We can have that as a motion. No second is required since it comes from the committee. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Dr. Church? Anything further to add? Okay. Now we'll go over to enforcement, Kevin Monroe. And Mr. Monroe, Chairman?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So we have before us several disciplinary cases, and the way that we normally handle these are in batches based on the type of discipline that is being recommended. So the first batch of cases are what we call the consent agenda items, numbers 1 through 6, and I'll read the case numbers into the record.
here, and I'll just summarize it at a very high level. These cases, each of them were discussed in fair detail during the committee meetings yesterday, which were also subject to a public meeting. But in these items, we have item 1, or case number 2023-11041, which was a billing dispute with the client. The board typically does not engage in mediating billing disputes, and so the recommended action is closure of this complaint. The second item, case number 2023-019281, revolved around communications or lack thereof between the complainant and the respondent. In this particular case, the complaint was filed against an individual in error and not against the firm. And so the recommended action is to close this complaint against the individual. There will be a companion complaint that will be open with the firm for potential further action on the part of the board. The third item, case number 2023-021831, is also an issue that revolves around communication issues or lack thereof relating to communications between the client and the respondent. Ultimately, the client filed a return with another practitioner. There were no penalties or other types of fee issues that were left hanging. So the recommendation here is for closure in this particular case. The fourth item is case number 2023-002761. This relates to use of the term accounting in a business name without a firm permit. The recommendation is for a letter of instruction, and this is primarily based on the fact that when the respondent was notified of the complaint, they moved quickly to change the name of the business, and that was documented. The fifth item, case number 2023-02921, is in the category of allegation of lack of due care. The recommendation here is to issue a letter of warning. There is a dispute related to a return that incurred a small amount of penalties and interest. The respondent offered to pay some of the penalties and interest and waive the outstanding fees owed, which essentially resolved that case. So the recommendation is to close, or not to close, but to issue a letter of warning. The last item in the consent agenda is item 6, case number 2023-006851. It is another case of improper use of accounting in a name or holding oneself out as providing the test services without a valid firm permit. In this particular case, the respondent was properly licensed in Virginia. However, there was advertising effectively in a Tennessee jurisdiction that implied that the CPA respondent could be holding out and providing services in Tennessee on an unlicensed basis. As it actually turned out, no services were ever provided in Tennessee, and the respondent promptly addressed the situation by removing the Tennessee location from its website. So the recommendation there is to close with a letter of warning. So what I would recommend, Mr. Chairman, is that the Enforcement Committee recommends proceeding with these items in the consent agenda by adopting the recommended either closure or letter of instruction or warning as listed.
All right. Mr. Chairman, just to clarify on number 2, the companion complaint there, ending in 21831, that is the complainant number 3.
Okay.
Which has already been opened and investigated.
Okay.
Just wanted to clarify.
I appreciate that clarification.
All right, that comes as a motion from the committee, which does not require a second.
May I make a note of our legal summary? 2 of the case numbers are not correct. Number 1 and number 5 are missing a 0. I don't know that matters, but in our legal summary, the case number is slightly different.
Good catch. So let's get those straight for the record. So item 1 would be case number 2023-011-041.
Right.
Based on what we have in the underlying detailed legal report. And then the other one was item 5.
Correct.
Let's just verify that case.
There are 2 zeros in the middle.
Okay. So the case The official case number for that item 5 is listed, or should be listed, as 2023-002921. So thank you for that good eagle-eyed catch.
All right, so we've updated the case numbers, and with that, we have the motion from the committee to document the correct case numbers. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Chairman?
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So the next category of cases that we worked through in committee yesterday are those for which there is proposed discipline recommended that would be imposed upon the respondent. The first case in that section is case number 2023-024191. It falls into the category of lack of due care, but there is an active litigation ongoing relating to this matter. And so typically what we do is we place the case in litigation monitoring and wait for the resolution of the legal case before we would determine what recommendation to bring back to the board, if any. So that is the recommendation for this one, to place it in in litigation monitoring. The second item is case number, I'm sorry.
Sorry again. These numbers have got the same issues.
Okay.
So you might want to read them off the actual legal report. There's 2 or 3 of them I've already seen.
Okay,
I don't know that that makes a difference, but it might.
well, let's get it right.
7 is correct.
Okay, so in terms of going on to case 8, that case number is listed as 2023-006411. This is another case where we have the use of accounting in a name without a CPA license or a firm permit. The recommendation here is for a $750, for authorization of a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $750. In this particular case, there were aggravating factors that were involved that formed the council's recommendation for a civil penalty recommendation, which was approved by the committee yesterday. The third item is case number 2023-003351. In this particular case, we have a test work being issued without a valid firm permit. There's also prior history, recent history in 2022 on this one, relating to a complaint being closed with an executed consent order and remission of payment for $3,000 civil penalty for offering a test services without a valid firm permit. In this particular case, the recommendation that the committee approve for board consideration is authorizing a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $6,000. And additionally, a recommendation requiring the respondent to obtain a valid, active firm permit within 30 days of the execution of the consent order if continuing to operate as an accounting firm. There's also a recommendation to open a separate complaint against the firm manager's individual CPA license. The next item, 10, in case number 2023-002621, relates to a CPE audit deficiency. And in this particular case, a person did not provide the documentation showing that he had completed the requisite amount of CPE during his renewal period. And I believe this came out as a result of an audit, a CPE audit. And just for those that are listening in, I think generally speaking, in every audit period, we select approximately 10% of CPAs who have applied for renewal to audit their underlying CPE requirement. In this particular case, there was a mitigating factor to be considered, and that is the fact that the respondent is 80 years old and has no prior history of complaints. So the recommendation approved by the committee was to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via a consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $1,000, and a requirement for the respondent to either complete the outstanding CPE hours within 60 days of execution of the consent order, or alternatively, to agree to immediately close his license.
The next item, 11, case number 2022-048441.
calls. Or somebody may, have a son or daughter that's developed a mental health condition, and now they're being told you need to get a conservatorship so we can get them in a treatment center. So again, we walk families through these processes.
Okay,
We've muted the participant.
all right, very well. This item or case relates to failure to renew a firm permit operating without a valid firm permit and failure to remediate issues from peer review. There is history here also with prior complaints closed for failure to comply with peer review requirements. The firm was still on probation, but the expiration date of that probation is, the expiration date of December 31, 2022 is overriding the probation. And here, the recommendation approved by the committee for board consideration is to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 and suspension of respondent's firm permit until they come into compliance with peer review requirements. Item 12, or case number 2023-010611, relates also to a test work without a firm permit and failure to sign up for peer review. This is another case, and I think the next case also are ones where we have licensees that are issuing attestation reports, be they compilation, audit, or review, that have been requested by clients so that they can have their application before the contractor's licensing board be approved. And after the fact, the licensing board does check after the fact with us to see if the CPAs that were providing those attestation reports were properly licensed and had the appropriate peer review enrollment to do so. So it's a detective control that catches this after the fact, and when it's caught after the fact, we have to deal with the discipline for the licensee here, and that's what this case and the following one are. So here the recommendation for item 12 is to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $1,000. Similarly, for item 13, which is case number 2023-011921, we also have another report issued in a situation to satisfy requirements by the Tennessee Board of Licensing Contractors, or for licensing contractors. An audit report was issued in this case, and the firm did not have a firm permit and was not enrolled in peer review. So the recommendation approved by the committee is to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $3,000. The last item, number 14 in this category of cases, case number 2023-024651, relates also to another situation where we had the test work issued without a valid firm permit or enrollment in peer review in context of reports issued for the Tennessee Board of Licensing Contractors requirements. The recommendation here is to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $1,000. So for this batch, the committee is recommending board approval of the recommended disciplines as listed.
All right, so we have a motion from the committee. It doesn't require a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have two representations of cases that the board has previously considered. The first one relates to a CPE audit deficiency. Get back to the case number here. That case number is 2023-001491. And essentially the new information that was presented in that particular case
if the respondent reached out to counsel subsequent to the board's actions and explained that they would prefer to voluntarily close their license given their personal life circumstances, they just simply did not feel that they could meet the requirements of the consent order and come into compliance with the CPE requirements in a timely manner, and they are hoping to close their license. Council recommended that, and the committee, in its deliberations, developed the following recommendation: that we would allow the respondent to voluntarily close their license via a consent order, and additionally to require the respondent to come before the board should they ever seek reactivation of their license. In the language that we discussed yesterday, it was pointed out that I think there was a misnomer of terms there. We're not looking at reinstatement, but reactivation in this context. Let's go ahead and consider that one separately. So the committee's recommendation to the board is to accept this augmented recommendation to allow the licensee to voluntarily close their license.
All right, so we have a motion from the committee, no seconds required. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Our last case is a representation case from the prior quarter discussion. The case numbers are 2022-034981 and 34991, 2022-034991. This is a case that involved concerns about essentially sharing of answer keys and on internal firm-based training. After the board's action, the respondent approached legal counsel and staff to request further discussion about the board's disposition of that matter. As a result of that, counsel met and staff met with the respondent. Also, one of our board members, Greg Gilbert, participated in what's an informal discussion or hearing process, which is permitted by our board practices and policies to kind of further see if there could be a meeting of the minds reached. The respondent was essentially, I guess, wanted to point out a couple of items for further information. They wanted to point out that they had subsequently implemented firm-wide question randomization for their assessments and tests. They noted that the SEC order itself did not find that respondent encouraged and or facilitated cheating, and that the involved Tennessee licensees or employees, whether located in Tennessee or not, sent a total of 41 emails attaching CPE answer keys, and they reconfirmed that a total of 86 answer keys were sent throughout those 41 emails sent by Tennessee licensee employees. The original recommendation accepted by the board was for a $43,000 civil penalty to be paid by the, in essence, two firm permit numbers, two separate offices of the same firm in Tennessee. The respondent made a counter offer to pay a civil penalty of $20,500. In the discussion that we had yesterday, there was discussion on really what constituted an act that would be subject to civil penalty in the board's view. And because of the fact that Greg participated in the informal hearing process and could not vote, and because one of our other members was ill and could not vote, we did not formulate a formal recommendation to put forward to the board. So we will consider that as a full board. But in this particular case, I would make the motion that we reaffirm the $43,000 civil penalty amount and clarify that its basis was computed on the basis of a $500 civil penalty for each of the 86 instances of forwarding 86 answer keys that were stipulated by the respondent.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, motion and seconded. Do we have any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have a few items that I could mention. One is, I should not and cannot participate in making a motion for second it, which that's already passed, so that's not an issue, but I also should recuse myself from voting. But there are a few facts that I think are important to be on the record. One is that respondent stated that there were no criminal penalties involved or assessed in this case. Secondly, respondent wanted board to be aware that the penalty assessed is 4 times greater than any penalty previously assessed by this board. I do think it's important that we note that the benchmark they were using for prior penalties was assessed against an individual licensee and not a firm. And then the final point is respondent stated, and you may have said this, Mr. Chairman, but respondent stated that staff CPE hours exclusive of those that were obtained from answer keys exceeded hours required for licensure, at least for licensure in the state of Tennessee.
Just under the discussion note, I heard that yesterday, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, each individual person had to sign a statement that their CPE was true and correct. And if they had taken those answer keys, and in this case, let's just say one email had 3 answer keys to it, and they included that CPE on that statement, I don't understand why it would mean anything to say that they were over their rating. A lot of people submit CPE over 80 hours and then say, oh, well, it's no big deal. I didn't need it anyway. But you're making that representation as an individual when you submit that to the state board. And so I just I don't understand that comment, and it's irrelevant to me on dealing with anything here. The second thought I have was just, that the key here is that, and that may be a bad term, the penalty here is just $500 per incident. And if you had 86 answer keys sent, it would seem like to me that that was the potential for 86 answers of an exam to be used. And so I believe personally that I think that the recommendation on the motion today was very much on point. And I agree with affirming our previous statements on the penalties associated with this to the firm, not to an individual. Any other discussion?
And just to clarify for the board that, I think the reason why council brought that up was to clarify that they were not profiting off of time saved. For completing.
Okay.
Basically, they had heard some discussion at the previous board meeting that they wondered if by cutting quarters and using the entry key that they were completing their CPE in a shorter amount of time that it would require other people and therefore profiting off of more time to work. But basically they wanted to clarify that they completed all the required hours outside of the entry key.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, let the record show that Mr. Gilbert has recused himself from this vote. And I would say all those in favor now say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
That concludes the enforcement committee's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next one is the executive committee. The executive committee met yesterday. At that point, we asked our executive director to go through the travel since our last meeting, and we went through that travel. In addition, we went through the financial statements. We looked at the actual versus budget, and then compared it to the previous year through May of 22 versus May of 23. The June numbers weren't ready, and so I think everybody has had the ability to see that report and go through it. And I would ask at this point if there's any questions related to the financial report. All right. We actually are so blessed in Tennessee to have so many people who are willing to reach out and be a part of the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. And I can't think of a time ever that we have had more changes going on in the accounting profession with the CPA evolution, the changing of the CPA exam and the need for extra time is, you know, it's kind of gone through with the Laws and Rules Committee today. And, you know, we're just very blessed also to have not only our executive director, but Duke himself going to some of the updates and getting involved and asking questions, and our attorneys, our legal counsel. And so with that, we have a lot of people who serve on committees, and I would ask if anybody has any updates for any committees and or regionals that we attended.
I could talk about a couple of things. We've already addressed some, of course, because Wendy and I are on the CBT committee, and they have dealt over several meetings and regionals with this going from 18 to 30 hours, and that committee was asked to consider in a joint meeting with ASCPA, our preference. Of course, some states are going with 36, and some are going with 30, and we're really going to have a variation, a variety of approaches, I think, once that goes in. And so coordinating all that, and on top of that, of course, we have the situation where some states are just pretty much nullifying the 150-hour requirement. So we have discussed all those things. We've also talked about transition, and I was on the transition task force for NASBA that recommended ultimately that anyone who had passed CDC would be able to retain it even under the new format and use that in lieu of one of the disciplines. And so that has created another situation that promises to be complicated because people are rushing, as Wendy says, to take BDC, and states are having to cut that off, the notice to sit early. I forget what date it is, but there promises to be a flurry of requests, and can I still take it, and you know, things like that. And so they warned us that this could happen. So, and then just the regional, lots of talk about this new program, the ELE, trying to let people who've got their undergraduate accounting and accounting degrees get the extra hours in a way that allows them to work at the same time. It brings in the firm and has the firm and the A school and the students all working together. And then in the breakout session, it was obvious that there was a lot of confusion about that, and that some of the professors in the room didn't understand that exactly what this was trying to do and how it would affect their school, and whether it might diminish the number enrolled in some smaller sections, and even the big schools were not sure if it would affect them or take some of their students away. But again, we just have a lot of things that are going to be playing out in the next few months, and as I told Wendy this week, the good part, I guess, is it's all transition. So it will somehow play out, and we'll go on to the new format. But in the meantime, I think we have a lot of decision and complexity to deal with.
Thank you. Dr. Church, any other updates?
Mr. Chairman, there's one update on the NASBA Regulatory Response Committee I'd like to just highlight for the purpose of the state practitioners. So the PCOB has issued a proposed statement relating to auditing standards for public companies as it relates to the basic topic of no-CLAR or non-compliance with laws and regulations. And the PCOB has become much more active of recent in terms of
statement, proposed statement modifications, and this one has a huge set of implications for practitioners. Essentially, where things stand now is that if there are non-compliance issues that have a direct and material effect on an entity's financial statements that are subject to audit, they would be in the jurisdiction of existing standards, which would imply auditor responsibility over that. Among many other things, the proposed standard basically widens that definition to include what would be auditor responsibility for indirect effect of non-compliance with laws and regulations on the entity. And so in my mind, what I'm conjuring up is in the context where the SEC is proposing massively expanded requirements with respect to ESG types of rules, climate change types of rules, where there really are no standards that have been articulated to judge by. This vastly increases the auditor's scope and probably their liability or potential liability in this situation. And so, I don't think the comment letter for that proposed statement has expired yet. And so if there are practitioners here that would, in the state, that would like to comment, this is probably, in my view, this is the most far-reaching and impactful standard that the PCOB has proposed in its history beyond standard number 1, which basically adopted the existing ASB structure as it existed back in the early 2000s. And this also in the context of the SEC proposing to accelerate filing deadlines for particularly large registrants. I think this is a recipe for chaos within the profession and could even break the profession. I mean, that's a personal view on my part. And so just to encourage everyone to lean into that particular issue, and if you're so motivated or affected, to let the PCOB know through the comment letter process what you think of their proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Monroe. That's a great update.
So basically, any law that could create significant fines, any but non-compliance with a law, where that non-compliance could lead to a big fine.
Well, a big fine or other, a commensurate type of penalty. The real scope change here is from direct and material
Right, that's what
to indirect, and there are also some statements there relating to that perhaps the materiality threshold should be lowered. And so it just, it made it clear to me that, unfortunately, one of the flaws in the Sarbanes-Oxley legislation that indicated that no more than 2 CPAs could sit on the PCAOB board, and that the chairperson could not be an active CPA in the last 5 years. It made it clear that, in my view, they are lacking a practical input from practitioners here in even proposing this kind of a proposed statement. So I'll get off my polemical high horse here, but I am concerned about that one.
And Kevin, so you expect NASDA to issue a comment letter on this?
Yes, their committee is going to issue a comment letter, and I'm just highlighting the most significant, potentially objectionable elements of that, but there were many more little bomblets laid out in that statement, I think, that could really change the profession. And yes, the Regulatory Response Committee is developing a draft, and ultimately that would be issued by NASDA. And typically, NASDA takes a very diplomatic, rather indirect approach, and there were some on the committee that advocated this is one where we need to be very direct and say you need to stop now and really understand the impact that this could create. And we haven't seen the text, or at least I haven't seen the text of the letter. John and I serve on the committee together of the draft, but they'll recirculate that back to the committee for us.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I serve on the NASDA Ethics Committee, and Mr. Chairman, you're aware of some of what we've been through, and so you correct me if I misstated any of this, but Mr. Chairman serves on the AICPA Peak Committee, that's the Professional Ethics Executive Committee. So Peak issued an exposure draft. So Andy's committee issued an exposure draft that NASPA Ethics Committee has reviewed and will be commenting on. But this exposure draft relates to public interest entities. So not publicly traded entities, but public interest entities, also referred to as PIEs, P-I-E-S. So the exposure draft is really designed to align U.S. standards more closely with those of IASPA. And essentially, they're heightened independent standards as well as some maybe heightened ESG reporting standards involved in this, at least indirectly. So really the exposure draft deals primarily with what is a PIE, a public interest entity. And at this point, the exposure draft states that a bank that has $1 billion in assets is a public interest entity. So that's a relatively small bank. The Federal Reserve defines a community bank as one that has less than $10 billion in assets. And under the exposure draft, we're defining a PIE as one that has $1 billion in assets, so 1/10 of what the Federal Reserve would refer to as a community bank. But typically, a bank that has $1 billion in assets generates revenues of $19 to $20 million a year on average. Why is that important? Because insurance companies are also PIEs, but they're only PIEs if their revenues exceed $500 million per year. So we have the insurance companies exempt if they're under $500 million, but banks not exempt if they're reach 19 to 20 million in revenue. So to me, there's some great inconsistencies there. Plus, the PIEs does not include credit unions, which small banks frequently compete with, and so that generated a tremendous amount of discussion among the NASPA Ethics Committee members, and so we are in the process of drafting comments. Probably where the Ethics Committee will come down is that a small bank will be subject to PIE will be probably in the $3 to $5 billion range as opposed to $1 billion. But these rules have far-reaching impacts on small community banks. So the committee's aware of that. We've had considerable discussion about it. And Dan Dustin is currently drafting our initial response. Mr. Chairman, you may have more information on that you can share.
I'll let you share that from the committee's perspective.
Okay.
I have a strong feeling about that, but I'll keep that one as a personal feeling. So, any other comments or updates? All right. Well, I had the pleasure of representing not only as a director, but the state of Tennessee. We got together with NASPA last Friday, in California to have our quarterly board meeting. I did not think I would be able to disclose this, but this morning we got an email that it's now has been stated that we could share from our chair. We actually voted on 3 awards that will be coming soon. We had to make sure that those individuals knew. The reason for that is I know one person in the room, and a lot of y'all probably know these people. So the Lorraine Sachs Award went to Kent Absek, and just a great person, worked through COVID and did an outstanding job of bringing all the executive directors together. I think Wendy might want to share something about Kent and your experience, because I think before Kent, the liaison to the board as a director from an ED standpoint, Kent really took it to another level.
He really did. I mean, he also has one of those personalities that, he brings people together, he listens, he's very humble, he takes suggestions, he tries to implement improvements where he's reasonable. And, he goes out of his way to reach out to individuals, to pull them into the realm as well. One of the biggest things he did during his term was to implement monthly meetings of executive directors. So every month we have a meeting that you can join if you can. If you can't, that's fine too. But it's a chance for us to share ideas, talk about issues that states may be having, to see if, share ideas. So sometimes there's a loose agenda, sometimes there's not much of an agenda. We always find something to talk about within that hour, and we do that via Zoom. So it's been a great asset to the executive directors, I think, across the country, and helps us to bring new people into the fray as well, and make them feel included. So that's, one of the highlights that I'm sure he is beyond deserving of that award. So excited to hear that.
I was excited to hear that too, when they announced that. The Distinguished Service Award went to Tyrone Dickerson. Tyrone is out of Virginia. I should say that Kent is the executive director for Idaho. And then the William Van Resler Award goes to Ted Long, and Ted is out of Ohio. So congratulations to those three people. One of the things that our chairman said was that we had record numbers of people who actually went online to vote to be on committees and to be a director associated with NASPA. And so a lot of volunteers. The word went out, and a lot of states are volunteering, and I think you can see around this table that we have a very active group too, including our executive director, who is very influential with the other executive directors across the nation. We had a huge discussion about 120 and 150. A lot of things were talked about. ELA was talked about. It's my understanding that the university that is going to participate in the ELA program will be announced in the next 2 weeks. They would not tell the board due to the MOU that's been signed with the AICPA. And so that news is to come. It's very exciting. They had over 100 firms that actually volunteered to participate in the pilot programs of the ELE. And so I think that the key is that NASPA and the AICPA are working to look at and get solutions for different pathways to the profession. I think that you're going to see us not stop there. The AICPA has developed a pipeline advisory committee. Active group is what they call it. They had a virtual meeting last week. They're going to have an in-person meeting this week. And they hope to present, not hope, but they will present in October to council, the AICPA council, an update on the committee, and I hope to have by next May a report. The goal is a national strategy for pipeline. So the word is out. We need more pipeline. We need more candidates, and we need it to protect the public. And we need it to get the work done. It's been a backlog of work. And so not only has NASPA heard it, we had a lot of discussion about what our reaction was going to be and what we needed to do. And I can't really pass that along right now, but I can tell you it was a very heavily engaged conversation. And a lot of eyes were open, and the need for different pathways was presented. And so, in other words, we all came to the conclusion we need to think outside the box. We need to come up with better ways. We need to do it now. And so I was very excited about that. And so there are two representatives from NASPA that will be on that group, our chairman, Rick Riesling, and then we also have Dan Dustin, who will be on that also. So a lot more to come. We got the word that, and that has been updated, but Maria Caldwell, not the Maria that works for NASPA, our legal person, our top legal person, but Maria Caldwell, the CPA, is our 2023-2024 vice chair nominee. Maria came over as a child from Cuba with her family and came into the United States, and she's a great CPA and a great partner, and I think that Mr. Monroe probably knows her because she works for your firm, your old firm.
Someone who has a conservatorship, we have a supporting statement for the conservatorship, somebody who did the exploration, they found out on the front end, they talked to.
It said that, that AICPA is hearing from the executive directors in other states about the need for data. And so there's an intense, effort going on right now, behind the scenes to increase the ability to, collect and sort data so that if the state needs that data, they can get it. That's done at the state level. And so, in fact, that's a pretty private, even if you were on the committee when the committee existed, you didn't even get to see the data. They kept it pretty locked down. There was one item that it's a CPA in our state, Julie James, a CPA. She won the 2023 CSCPA Impact Award recipient. And so they put a picture of her on the screen with the Tennessee Reward, and she has now been moved up to a director at NASPA in risk and compliance and also enterprise risk management. And so I was very proud to be a Tennessean and from the board and to see her up there. And they were very they were glowing with her and her abilities and and her future. And so that was really neat. The Auditing Standards Board is coming to Nashville. Not only do we have NASPA here, but NASPA brings people from all over the world here to have meetings over there at their building down the street. And it's exciting to see that takes place here, and that once they come, they get kind of into the Nashville scene, and they all get excited, and they want to come back here again. And so we've had several groups that come and keep repeating the process of coming here. That's also exciting to hear as they're getting up there talking about what they're using the facilities for and the other organizations, and the fact that that you're part of the NASPA family, but you're part of the Tennessee Board and Tennessee citizen, and it's very exciting to hear and know. And then we also went through the CPA evolution and the CPA exam, and a process that's been 4 to 5 years is kind of related to in your update, and that and the uptick of things that are happening so fast. But from our standpoint was that they gave us an update was that they're ready. They know there's going to be some issues, but they thought about everything. Of course, you can't think about everything that can go wrong, and that they're really focused on that, and they don't see any issues right now. As of today, and this would have been Friday, 21 states or jurisdictions rather, boards, they've already voted to go from to the additional 30 months. That's exciting, and something that that we are very excited that's going to happen across all jurisdictions, hopefully. So, and there's some more programs coming out that really can't talk about yet, but they're looking at, as I said, on pathways that really we have a task force that's looking at some issues, and that task force is, Wendy also she serves from that task force, and they're supposed to get a request to take a look at some updated information, and so that's exciting also. And so that's all that I have to report from the NASPA Board of Directors meeting as of Friday. Any other comments from anybody?
Chairman, what was the latest discussion at NASPA about the pipeline? I know the pipeline task force has worked on this, and what I've been hearing and reading recently is that it's looking better. Did y'all discuss that?
We did, and it was actually discussed in the financial section. As everybody knew, that we expected 23, really our 22, 23 to see an uptick in candidates sitting for the exam, the CPA exam. We actually, if you go back and just compare, 23 may be a lot more than what we had actually thought of or even budgeted for. So we're seeing candidates really coming in and taking the exam there were a lot of questions in that area, and it's really exceeded our numbers that we projected on budget. So that's great news. We are also seeing in that discussion, it was made clear to us that we're seeing more freshmen and sophomores coming into the accounting profession. So more students are coming in, and so there seems to be an uptick of interest in accounting. And it's looking as though the culprit for the low candidates really was COVID. And I think that we're seeing that across all professions, because it's not only engineers or dentists or doctors or other profession, architects. I mean, it affected us too as accountants, the accounting profession, and so that seems to be kind of turning and going in a very positive mode. I had asked Wendy earlier if we had seen an uptick in candidates at the exam in Tennessee. It hasn't shown itself here yet.
Yeah, it hasn't shown itself here. In 2022, in the second quarter, we had a total of 563 individuals in the testing pipeline, and this year, second quarter, 564, an addition of one person. And then new candidates, in the second quarter last year, we had 144, and in the second quarter this year, we had 140. So it's relatively flat to the prior year. So hopefully, some of the data that we got in the DOE meeting was on people scheduling out in the future, which looks very positive as well. Of course, we don't have data until they've actually sat. And so, that might be some of the activity that they're looking at as well.
So it seems to be rebounding, but that's not enough. We got to do more, and we got to do more as a profession. And that was very much heard and understood at the board meeting. And based on what I heard and our reaction to it as a board, you should see many more things coming out publicly than ASPA in the future. And that's exciting. All right. Any other comments? Or
I attended the Western Regional. For those of you that attended the Eastern, you also attended the Western. It's exactly alike. The agendas are the same. The speakers are the same. It's just different people there, but the same speakers are there at both places. I wound up attending virtually because I had an unexpected dental issue that I couldn't leave town with. But all the topics were covered virtually. Those of you that don't want to travel, virtual option is a good option. Because all you miss by doing it virtually is the breakout sessions, which is usually just done by region or district or whatever state. Well, region, I guess. But otherwise, it's get all the topics, you get all the good. I think you attended the Eastern virtually. So that's a good option for us to consider. And they didn't charge me to do it virtually. It's free if you do it virtually.
It has been. They won't make any guarantees going forward, but it has been until now.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get the refreshments and all that kind of thing.
I think Andy made a good point before that you don't get the interaction with other people, but you get the information that it is has been good.
that's the thing I love about being in person is that you get to kind of look and talk, and a lot of times in the meetings you can't ask a question, or there's not enough time to ask a question, and then after a presentation I find myself walking up and talking and saying, well, what did you think about this, or what do you mean by that? And so it enabled you to dive deeper into the discussion of whatever is being presented. And of course, we had a lot of things that were being presented in the Eastern. But also, it's just a breakout where you get into a region like the Southeast region. You've got the board members in there. Usually our executive director just gives a brief update of what's going on. And then you have the chance to, as another executive director comes in, then you have a chance to ask questions and say, how did y'all do something, or how do you do this, or, you know, we don't talk about anything that we physically do on the board, but we do talk about procedurally, things that we do and issues that they may be having in a state, just in general terms. And so, I find that extremely interesting, and it's hard, that they do virtually.
No, and this is the second.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is, yeah.
But it's a good alternative, you can't go.
For those that didn't attend either one, I'll read this list of, topics that were covered, and it's a lot of things we discussed in here. So ELE, which Pam's already talked about, the new exam, the breaking out of the new exam, legal update, which, many times they have an attorney, which they did this year, talking about, and Maria Caldwell does that too, talking about legal implications on things that are going on and certain cases that are being done. They had a representative of the UAA committee, they had our chairman, our UAA chairman, pipeline task force, legislative, and then licensure pathways. So it's all the hot topics that you get the latest and greatest information on. So, and just to add to what Dr. Church was saying, not only the small schools are worried about ELE, but I'm very familiar with some people at some larger universities that are really worried about the effect on the math program. So I don't want to say worried, but concerned.
Well, it remains to be seen. So when Andy was talking, I thought,
There's apprehension.
you know, he was talking about the positive aspects of it, and let's not overlook that. And, I know a lot of students who really have financial needs, who need support in some way, and probably need to work while they're doing the master's, and we all know there's multiple ways. So if this can be one way that addresses that, but there are others, as you said, there are things that haven't worked, then perhaps it would be a new path. But there is concern on the part of some schools about what's going to happen. I think we're all waiting to hear the details. So.
I've heard some of those details, and there's some exciting things coming. That probably, I would say that NASPA has heard the concerns, and that they are actually reaching out to look at how to correct some of those concerns, or to address them, maybe a better statement. And so I think you're going to see more comments come out there. You know, in Tennessee, we're so blessed that if a person wants to go to college, they can go to a community college and it can be paid for. Then to get your next 2 years to become a CPA, or to be in a candidate to become a CPA, you can actually then go to college. I think the ELE what it does is take those students that have a need, that don't have the financial ability to go into a profession. We're kind of opening it up with ELE, because that earn, learn, and experience to get that last 30 hours really does make a big difference. And not everybody's going to go to a master's program. However, there's a distinct, with the master's program, I'm not sure it's going to hurt the master's programs, because they are putting out a quality product. When those students get out, most of them are taking advantage of the Tennessee law that allows them to sit for the exam at 120 while they're still in the master's program. So they're taking advantage of that. And, you know, we had some discussion with other firms that were talking about the candidates that come out. They are at another level with a master's. And so I think they do generate extra future financial position of themselves with that certificate.
In reality, the students who will benefit the most from this ELE program very well would not have been able to afford the MAC program anyway.
Correct.
So that's what you're hoping for.
That's
Well,
what we're
and
hoping for.
this model of building connections among firms and students, I think could, as you say, open the door for new ways to define those things. So, I happened to have lunch with, some members of one of the big four firms who were, I think, it was so vital to them to hear the idea that perhaps these individuals who would become CPAs if they had the resources to finish that 150 could be not the answer, but an approach to increase the pipeline through one method. So, it's kind of, it's expanding the availability and I think the diversity of our profession.
I agree
And so those things
100%.
are,
And that's exciting. That really is exciting. Any other comments? All right, we'll move on to our public comment period and then ask if there's anybody who would like to say something that was signed in.
Mr. Chairman, we don't have anyone that's signed in.
Okay. All right. Old and new business. The first one is a recognition of someone. And I'm going to read right here. This someone has dedicated their time to be on this board as a public member from 2015 to 2023. Was very active on the board. To my knowledge, I've tried to reach out and determine, but have been told that she may have been the longest serving public member we've ever had as a board, and that attests to the fact that she was so dedicated to the board. She was so involved with the profession. She attended NASPA meetings, actually was on NASPA committees, and she really made a difference here on our board. And so today we want to present something to Judy. It says in recognition of your appreciation and in recognition of and appreciation of your significant contributions to leadership to the CPA profession on behalf of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. And Judy will come up and opportunity to.
Perfect. Lots to say. So, first of all, Janet, sorry, I can't believe, this is the first time you're here. I was so delighted when I walked in and saw your smiling face. So, awesome. I just wish Gabe was here. But, anyway, we've had such a fun time through the years, and, I have enjoyed getting to know each and every one of you, and I even know Brad, which is awesome that he's taken the public spot, and I think you're all fun, and you're not your typical accountant, and which I'm certainly not, and I think it's been a blast. I think we have probably, I know we have the best executive director in all of NASPA, and I'm pretty sure we probably have one of the better boards, if not the best board in all of NASPA, of the state boards of accountancy. So I think our team here is well respected by the NASPA staff and all that, and I just think things have changed. I think things have changed a lot since when I first came on to this point, and all of you and all of us are responsible for that, and it's been a really impressive progression to where we are now. So I appreciate that, and I love being with y'all. So y'all know I was kind of I don't know who's going to take over bringing snacks, breakfast, and making sure everybody's well fed and all that. And we'll be hosting the things that bond, it's important. Relationships are important, very important.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I want to give all of you a hug when everybody.
All right, yes, sir. Anybody, please say something.
I think one of the things that, distinguished Judy, other than the candy and the snacks,
And the question.
yeah, the president. But, she was very dedicated to her position as she got on the board. She became, I don't know if you became familiar with all of our rules and regulations, or whether you already were, I don't know. But being the public member, you seem to know a lot about the profession, the rules and the requirements and so forth. I think some of that became, as you became active in NASPA and so forth, I think you brought some of it already with you. You were a great representative of the public, even though by being on this board, we're protecting the public, their interests. But I think in your case, you were also representing the public by being on the board in that position, like Brad's going to do now. So, and I got to tell you this, those of you that are here, the first time I attended a NASPA regional meeting, or maybe the second, I don't know, Judy was sitting next to me at the meeting, and she brought a bag of M&Ms, and you could tell that she had a lot to do with the accounting skills and so forth. The first thing she did before she ate any of those M&Ms was she emptied the bag and laid them out in order of color. She didn't know I was watching her, but she laid them out in order of what color they were, and ate one at a time by color.
Well, until they were all the same, had the same number of M&Ms. And then I would go down.
I didn't know that.
Yes. I'm watching closely.
Seriously, we're gonna miss you.
Same here. I really miss y'all. Who knows, I may drop in sometime. Do I have to register or something? Okay.
So the meeting rooms downstairs are undergoing construction,
Oh,
and so
oh,
we're up here temporarily.
okay. Yeah.
Well, and Brad may not be here with us all 3 years.
Besides being a great board member, you know, I only got to serve 3 years, I guess, with Judy, but, I didn't meet Harold, get to hang out at Cos Place and have a lot of fun and the candy. I think one thing that struck me is that as a public member, or just a member in general, you're always willing to say, no, I don't agree with the group. And sometimes, you know, you kind of get sucked into the conversations and the discussion and whatever, it's sort of an automatic whatever, you know, but Judy was always willing to say, no, I don't agree with that, here's why, and to question what we were doing. So I think that, in my mind, represents a great public member, you know, who thinks a little bit different from a different perspective than the rest of us CPA members. So I appreciate it. I still have some inventory.
Oh, well,
I may or may not share it with you. Larry Elmore's been
to
talking.
everyone, I no longer partake of those because I had, for the first time, a dental issue. And I was like, if I ever have anything, you know, if I have any dental issues as a result, I'm done. Well, that was it. I was done. I don't do it anymore.
Thank you for
That's
that.
why I didn't bring any.
Thank you for that, but also thank you again for all of your exemplary service on this board, but also as a public member, I think it's very interesting and noteworthy that you were very involved with NASDA and still are, yeah. So thank you for that. You've gone above board.
Oh, yeah, love it.
I would just add is that what I respect them in many qualities is your viewpoint as a business person. We've had a lot of wide variety of business experiences in your career. And I think when we're dealing with respondents who were subject to discipline or in hearings or so forth, the empathy and the perspective that you had as a non-CPA, but as a business person and as just a person, really meant a lot and brought a lot to our deliberations and discussions. And I've never known you to be anything but a straight shooter in terms of speaking your mind, and that has been welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and again, appreciate all your hard work.
It's my pleasure. I will say that. Totally. It's my pleasure.
So any other business before we need to move forward?
Mr. Chairman, I have just a question for Wendy. As we were informed yesterday that there's a change in executive director at the Board of Contractors Licensing. Does that give us opportunity to maybe amend some of the issues that we've had related to peer review, folks signing reports that shouldn't be signed, CPA signing reports that shouldn't be? And one of the things we've talked about is that the licensing board would require a peer review report, then we could remedy a lot of the cases that we hear and really keep folks from getting in trouble. As you know, it extends the licensing period because they get rejected, and then the CPAs get in bad predicaments. And seems like that maybe with some help that could be remedied. I know Alex Martin was working on that at one time, and so I don't know if that's an opportunity for us. But
I think it absolutely is. We've been trying to give the executive director a chance to settle into the position. He came from the fire division of Commerce and Insurance and had maybe 4 to 6 weeks to try to get that off of his plate. So I think there's definitely an opportunity to brainstorm. I have some ideas. I think those are great ideas on how we can provide more education in that area. And of course, if there's changes needed on our side, we can do that. But I think most of it is informational, providing resources to those folks, maybe changing their requirements to make sure that those people are qualified that are providing that service. And so if you have thoughts specific to that, if you could email them to me, if I can make sure that they're on my list as well. And I'd like to say I will have some sort of report at the next meeting, because that's the plan, is to really get together and talk about a game plan with this.
also, I want to say at the last meeting, there was some discussion about our civil penalty matrix, and with all the staff trying to get some attention to that. I'm just curious. I know y'all been busy.
No, I probably should have added that to my executive director's report. So that is still the plan. I had informed Chairman Bonner that I just was not able to get to it. So the plan is for us to review in conjunction with Kevin Monroe to come up with a revised schedule to present to you all for review and approval. So that will land on the October meeting.
Thank you.
And that delay doesn't rest solely on Wendy's shoulders. That was kind of wrapped up as well. So part's on me as well.
And I'll take the blame for that. I probably should have updated the board for that, but we had already talked, and she had let me know that.
I wasn't trying to criticize.
It's still on the, it's still on the radar.
It's still on the radar.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Anything else in old new business? All right. The next, as everyone knows, we always start a new year on July the 1st, and at that time, on the first meeting, we usually elect officers. And so we come now to the time of election of officers. Today we will start by seeking nominations for chair, for vice chair, and for secretary. And so we'll open up the floor for nominations for chairman.
Mr. Chair, I nominate, or I recommend that, you serve at least another year for the board as chair. So I would put that in the form of a motion, if you're willing to accept.
I would be honored to accept it. Any,
I'll second the motion.
Yeah.
any other nominations? All right, see none, but all those,
I guess all those in favor of the motion, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
okay,
Congratulations.
thank you very much. It's an honor to serve. The next position would be vice chair. Do I have any nominations for vice chair?
Let me say before you take nominations that I have no qualms about someone else. I'm a strong believer in everyone getting an opportunity to be on the executive committee during their tenure. And, I've got 1 year left. This is my last year, so I've had the privilege of being secretary and vice chair both. And I don't have a bit of problem someone else that's not been either getting some of these spots, because I think it's good for the board and also for the individuals to participate in the executive process. So I'll make that clear before you. I'm not being presumptuous that somebody's going to nominate me, but
So which one do you want?
I'm just saying, I don't have a problem if somebody else wants to take one of those spots.
Mr. Chair, I nominate Mr. Elmore for a second term vice chair.
And a second? Second. Any other nominations, or go ahead, Wendy?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. Any other nominations? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And our last position is secretary. Do we have any nominations for secretary?
Keeping with Larry's comments, are there any folks that haven't served in an executive committee capacity that would like to?
This is not the year for me.
And Rob?
I think it's in good hands as it is right now.
I would nominate Mr. Gilbert to fulfill that role. He's willing.
Second.
Second. Before you vote, I would echo Larry's, I'm glad anyone who would love to serve in this role is welcome to do that.
I've just been grateful for anyone who can view the videotapes or recordings of our meetings, particularly after what we've been through sometimes on disciplinary cases. So hats off, and thank you.
He's got the stripes to show for it.
Yeah.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations. Congratulations. And congratulations, Mr. Past Chair. You're still on the executive committee. So, and we appreciate all of the hard work there on the executive committee. I think that we don't say it enough, but Greg goes out and does listen to the tape several times, as other secretaries have, and goes through to make sure that the minutes are absolutely correct. And then Larry's always engaging and bringing stuff from the vice chair, and we just appreciate our past chair, who's so passionate about the profession and all the outreach that you do for the profession, and talk about the issues that you see in the profession, and update people on different areas. It's an honor to have you in that position, and also to be serving on this board. I appreciate it. Any other further business? we need to do formations of committees. And so I know that at that point, I'll turn it over to our executive director. She usually has a recommendation for kind of changing up a little bit on the committees, and, any thoughts there?
So typically the way we've done it is, I collect interest from you all. Is there anything specifically you'd like to, any committee you'd like to serve on? Please let me know. Anything you don't want to do? Anything you'd like to chair? Please let me know any of that information, and I will try to gather, that information together, and then typically make recommendations to the chairman. And at that point, he will make selections on who will serve on it. And you will be, we typically will send those out in advance of the next meeting, but formally we vote on them at that meeting.
So please,
Share that with me, as
Yeah.
well as whether you want to go to the NASA annual meeting.
all right. Well, seeing that, is there any other business we have before us today? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Thank you, everybody. Great job. Long meeting today, but appreciate everybody's input.